Yekubu Gowon was born in 1934, in a modest home in the remote village of Kanki, Plateau State, Nigeria. His early life was marked not by privilege, but by the quiet discipline of a boy raised with expectation and restraint. His father, a local school teacher, instilled in him the twin pillars of duty and education, and young Yekubu internalized them with the solemnity of a child who understood, even then, that the world was both fragile and demanding. The Nigeria he grew up in was a mosaic of peoples and traditions, a land of beauty and tension, where colonial rule had left its indelible mark and the promise of independence shimmered tantalizingly on the horizon. He moved through his formative years quietly, observing the hierarchies and unspoken rules of his society, a boy learning to measure every word and every action. His entry into the military was almost inevitable, yet it was a path he pursued with methodical determination rather than youthful bravado. At the Nigerian Military Training College in Kaduna, and later at the prestigious Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in England, he honed not only his technical and strategic skills but also an understanding of leadership under pressure. He was neither the loudest nor the most flamboyant cadet, but there was in him an aura of steadiness, an almost prophetic sense that he would be entrusted with responsibilities that others might shrink from. By the early 1960s, as Nigeria prepared to claim its independence fully, Gowon's career was ascending quietly, his reputation built on diligence and reliability. Yet the stability of Nigeria itself was far more precarious than any training exercise could simulate. The young nation was a patchwork of ethnicities and religions, and beneath its official proclamations of unity lay fissures that widened with every passing day. The military, ostensibly a neutral guardian of order, became a mirror of these divisions. In January 1966, a coup erupted, violent and shocking, toppling the First Republic and killing Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa and several senior leaders. Gowon, at that moment, was a lieutenant colonel, not the most senior officer, but one whom circumstance and consensus would lift into the center of power. It was not ambition that brought him to the helm, but rather the perception of him as a stabilizing force, someone who could bridge the yawning gaps between factions and ethnicities. As he assumed leadership, the country teetered on the brink. Tensions simmered between the eastern region, dominated by the Igbo, and the western and northern regions. Gowon, deeply aware of the historical weight on his shoulders, sought reconciliation, offering promises of unity and restructuring that would prevent further bloodshed. Yet the fractures ran deep, and in 1967, the eastern region, led by Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu, declared independence as the Republic of Biafra. What followed was a civil war that would engulf the nation, testing Gowon's leadership, resilience, and conscience in ways no training could have prepared him for. The Biafran War was brutal. It was a war not only of arms but of logistics, starvation, and ideology. Gowon found himself balancing the harsh necessities of military strategy with the human cost of conflict. Starvation became a weapon in Biafra, and images of suffering, children with hollow eyes, families torn apart, were broadcast and whispered across the world. Gowon's decisions were scrutinized not just by generals and politicians, but by the global conscience. He imposed blockades and fought to reclaim territory, yet he carried in him a gnawing awareness that every victory was shadowed by unimaginable human suffering. In private moments, he would sit alone, contemplating whether the unity he was striving for justified the pain inflicted. The war demanded that he be both strategist and statesman, a role that left him isolated, haunted, and exhausted. Even as he navigated the battlefield, Gowon faced political storms in Lagos and beyond. Allegiances were fickle, and distrust simmered within the military itself. Young officers, impatient for reform and scandalized by perceived corruption and inaction, plotted behind the scenes. Gowon's very survival as head of state became as much a test of personal fortitude as it was of strategic acumen. He governed with the awareness that mistakes could not only cost him power but could unravel the fragile unity of a country still raw from colonial scars and interethnic tensions. His tenure was marked by paradox. The oil boom brought Nigeria sudden wealth, yet it was a wealth shadowed by the memories of bloodshed and the lingering distrust among communities. The prosperity of the nation did little to soothe the moral weight he bore. His leadership was a constant balancing act between the pragmatic and the ethical. By 1970, when the Biafran War finally ended, Nigeria was left battered but whole. Gowon had steered the country through its most perilous crisis, yet the victory was bitter. He presided over a nation scarred by death and displacement, and even his most loyal allies recognized that his choices, though perhaps necessary, had left enduring wounds. Reconciliation became his new battlefield, fostering forgiveness, rebuilding trust, and attempting to weave together a society that had been rent apart by war. It was an effort as delicate as any military maneuver, requiring patience, insight, and moral courage. He launched policies of reintegration and amnesty, hoping that unity could be rebuilt not solely by force but by empathy and practical governance. Yet, despite these efforts, Gowon's position was never secure. In 1975, while attending an Organization of African Unity summit in Kampala, he was overthrown in a bloodless coup by younger officers dissatisfied with his perceived slowness to reform and what they considered an overly cautious style of leadership. The fall was sudden, almost surreal. A man who had once commanded the fate of millions found himself removed quietly, without the spectacle of violence, a stark reminder of the impermanence of power. He went into exile, retreating from public life, carrying with him the memories of war, leadership, and the haunting question of whether the compromises he had made were worth the cost. Exile, however, did not erase his influence. Gowon returned to Nigeria years later, quietly engaging in religious and social initiatives, mentoring younger leaders, and contributing to national dialogue from the shadows rather than the spotlight. His life, once dominated by the drama of war and political intrigue, transformed into one of reflection and measured contribution. He became a living archive of a turbulent era, a symbol both of the burdens of leadership and the possibility of redemption. The nation had moved forward, and so had he, carrying a mixture of pride, regret, and enduring hope. What makes Gowon's story compelling is not just the political triumphs or the military strategies, but the human dimensions that run through every decision he made. He was a man raised in modesty, propelled by circumstance into extraordinary responsibility, and tested by crises that demanded moral and strategic courage in equal measure. His life illustrates the paradoxes of power, the necessity of hard choices, the isolation of command, and the heavy price of unity in a fractured land. There is mystery in his demeanor, the quietness, the reticence to self-aggrandize, the way he bore the consequences of history on his shoulders, and yet, within that mystery, there is a lesson about perseverance, humility, and the difficult path to redemption. As time passed, historians would debate his decisions, some praising his steadfastness, others condemning what they saw as indecision or moral compromise. But beyond the debates, Gowon remained an emblem of a nation's struggle to define itself, a figure who walked the razor's edge between war and peace, chaos and order. In reflecting on his life, one can sense both the tragedy of leadership and the glimmer of redemption. The man who saw his country torn apart, who bore the agony of choices that could never fully satisfy, and yet who lived to see reconciliation, to witness the gradual stitching together of a fractured nation, and to quietly contribute to the moral and civic life of Nigeria. Yakubu Gowon's story is not one of unalloyed triumph nor of unmitigated failure. It is the story of a man and a nation bound together by history, circumstance, and shared destiny. It is the story of a boy from Kanki who became a general, who navigated civil war, survived betrayal, and carried forward with reflective dignity. It is the story of a leader who, even in the weight of his missteps and the shadows of his era, found a measure of redemption, a reminder that history is rarely clean, leadership is rarely easy, and human life is a mixture of triumph, tragedy, and the quiet hope that the next chapter may be brighter. In the end, Gowon remained a figure suspended between myth and reality, a man whose life asked as many questions as it answered. How do you lead when every choice carries moral consequence? Can a nation heal after the deepest divisions? And can a man find peace when history will forever bear witness to both his victories and his failings? These questions lingered long after the headlines faded, echoing in the hearts of Nigerians and observers of history alike, a haunting testament to the enigma of Yakubu Gowon and the turbulent era he sought to navigate. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dazzling contents.